notes version of what you are about to endure with our arrival here. With that in mind, we thought that Rebecca would go first because she was born before me.
Putting yourself there.
Like I said, I'm trying to help you understand exactly what it is you're about to endure. So I was supposed to give a signal for when we're going to get started. So this is the signal.
Okay, my name is Rebecca. I was born Rebecca Seal, and I ended up being born in Alaska because my grandfather was in the military and really liked Alaska. My father graduated high school in Alaska, and when he came back to the States and he married my mom, and then they drove back to Alaska. So that's how I ended up in Alaska. Alaska has a huge military presence, so that's pretty common. I was born in January when it was 30 below, and I was born in Anchorage, and I spent my elementary years in Juneau. My dad worked for the state, and so I grew up in a climate very similar to this. So it's kind of nice to be back by the ocean. I haven't really spent a lot of time by the boats, but where I lived, it was a channel, so there was lots of boats all the time. So I'm really excited to be here by the ocean. When I was in high school, my dad's job transferred back to Anchorage, and so I graduated from high school in Anchorage. And I had a pretty rough relationship with my parents in high school. So when I went to college, I got as far away as possible. And I went to the middle of Iowa, because you can't fly directly to the middle of Iowa, like if I went to Seattle or Omaha or, someplace like that. So, they say you go to college and you meet a boy, and I used to say that was the end of the story, because I met Bill the third day that I was in Iowa, and we got married before I graduated college. But while I was in college, I went overseas for a year, and I spent my junior year in Spain. And when I came back, we got married, and then I graduated, and so I have a degree in international business and a minor in Spanish. But running from my parents was also running from God. My parents are missionaries in Alaska. My dad is very involved in Gideon's, and my mom started a mission for the crew on the cruise ships that come to Alaska. Well, not this year, so they're kind of taking the year off. But anyway, I married Bill in that time that I was running from God, and I never wanted to go back to God, and I never wanted to be in ministry because I had already lived that. Sorry, I'm a crier. Yes. Okay. I never thought I would ever go back to Alaska because I ran away. When I met Bill, there was a lot in Bill's family that I really, really liked. His mom was super sweet and accepted me and loved me like I was her own. And I needed that. Bill's family was culturally Christian, so it was a kind of a similar background we were coming from. And there was a lady that kept inviting me to church. But I didn't want to go to church. I didn't want anything to do with God. And then we decided to start a family. We had our oldest daughter. She's 21 and still in Alaska. And your mind changes when you have kids. And I thought about how much I loved that little tiny baby. And I remember, what I was taught when I was a child, that God loves me. And I realized that God loves me more than I could ever love that tiny little baby. And I knew I had to go back to church. Because that was within me, even though I was running away from it. And the only church I really thought about was the one the lady invited me to invite people to church, whether they come or not. This time, you never know when they think they want to go, where are they going to go? The place where they're invited to. So we went to this Assemblies of God church, and it was full of old people, and I was the youngest one there with my little baby. And the ladies were so nice. They're like, we haven't used our nursery in years, but please bring your baby to the nursery. We'd love to watch baby. I felt kind of weird. But they welcomed me with open arms. And they asked about the rest of my family. And I said, well, I have a husband, but, you know, he's running from God too. So go get him. And that's how we ended up going back to church. But after we started going to church and we started making some better life decisions, Bill said, I want to be in ministry. And I said, oh, no, absolutely not. But I really believe that God has called us both into ministry. And I think Bill was very wise to wait until that call came to me too, because I was so against it. But when he said he wanted to go to Bible school, I said, you know, there's this little Bible school out in the middle of nowhere in Alaska. And my parents were still in Alaska, so we ended up back in Alaska. And the relationship with my parents is not totally healed, but we're okay. And I'm doing okay in ministry. We've been in ministry now for 20-some years, and I feel inadequate, and I think that's where God wants us to be, because I can't do it, but God can do it through me.
You can stay up here, or you can sit down.
I'll take one.
Oh, and then one, she evidently thinks I need these.
Not you.
Well, it may surprise you to find out that when I was born, my mother did not name me pastor, and then I grew up into it. I was born in Iowa, in a little town called Ottumwa, and some of you may be familiar with a TV show called MASH. Radar O'Reilly was supposedly from Ottumwa, Iowa, and that's why in college I was known as Radar. I was born and raised in a family that was culturally Christian. I mean, we were founding members, our family were founding members of a church, and we went to church because that's what you do, and we dressed up because you dress up to go to church, but it didn't affect our daily lives. So as I grew, I didn't have any real foundation, really. I rebelled as a teen, but not a lot. Way less than my mother did when she was a teen, so she thought she was winning. She's not here to defend herself, but she would agree. After all of that, growing up there, I went away to school, and we met, and you heard a little bit about that, and we got married. We started off as a young couple, and we both had similar views with God. I mean, you know, yeah, it's probably there, but, you know, so what? And got involved in a lot of really dark things for a few years. I'd be willing to talk about those if anybody has any questions. I don't like to glorify them unnecessarily. But I should have been locked up more than once, and the good Lord saw fit to graciously not let me get caught, I guess. Aaron arrived, and I was a little more sensitive to spiritual things, but not to the extent that I was going to accept an invitation to church. And I remember waking up one morning, and my wife and my daughter weren't there, and that was kind of weird. And then she rolls into the driveway, and they're dressed up, and I'm like, oh no, she went to church, and now she's got Jesus. I was really put out. And she's right, she sicked the people on me. They did it so well. Because I was raised culturally in a particular way, I couldn't really be rude to a preacher as much as I wanted to be. And he was blind. And I just could not bring myself to be rude to him. I'd be rude to literally anybody else, but I just couldn't turn Jerry away. Jerry knew it, and he used it against me. He kept bringing guys over to visit me, praying for me, and I really went to church just to get people off my back. I figure I'll go a couple of times, they'll feel like they won, and then I can kind of slide out. I showed up and I was pierced, long hair, black trench coat. I didn't really look like I belonged, and they didn't care. They didn't care what I looked like. They just wanted me to come in and hear the gospel. That is really hard to argue with. I tried to get them to act badly toward me. I did. I wanted an excuse, and they just would not give me one. I kept coming because, I couldn't generate an offense. And I heard the preaching of the gospel. And one day I was overwhelmed with a sense of exactly what kind of a person I was, that I was not beyond God's power, ability, and desire to save. And I didn't walk a literal sawdust trail, but I had to walk a really long way up those aisles to talk with the pastor. After that, they assigned me to be the driver to the blind guy while he went out visiting. I thought I was a chauffeur. Jerry was taking me in and showing me what visitation and ministry actually looked like. He was discipling me, but he knew that if he told me he was discipling me, I was probably the sort to have no part of that. He was a really tricky guy. Well, as time went on, I continued in my profession, basically retail sales, that kind of thing. And I took a promotion. We left the church where we'd gotten saved and we were being discipled and went out of state. And the good Lord often gives you what you want, so you can figure out that you didn't really want it. I floundered spiritually. It was terrible. I hated it. I was looking for an excuse that time to leave, and I got it when we rolled into the place that I was managing, and my 2-year-old daughter said, "Yay, we're at Daddy's house." That was pretty difficult. So I just quit. We were homeless. We loaded things into a trailer, and we went back to my hometown of Ottumwa. Got involved in the church again, and this time the church, as part of the discipling, they saw that I would be a good fit for their prison ministry. I knew most of the guys in there, and I was related to a lot of them. Most of the time when people would be invited to come to chapel, they're like, "Oh, you gotta hear the preacher." And they'd show up and they're like, "It's you? No, where are your coveralls?" They thought I was in prison or dead. That's why they hadn't seen me in a while. Well, while we were doing that, Ethan was born, and like Rebecca said, I became convinced that full-time ministry was what God wanted, and she wasn't. And so I waited for 18 months. We prayed together for a year and a half. Never ask God to teach you patience, because He will answer that prayer. And I had to learn some patience over the course of that time. But I knew that I was at the end of what I could do to help people, because there was a young man named Justin, and he got out. I'd been discipling him. He broke away, and during a high-speed chase, a deputy was killed. And he was looking at life. I was trying to offer him biblical counsel, and I walked out of the jail, and I just crumpled and started sobbing in front of the visitation booths, because I didn't have any of the tools I needed to help young men like Justin. Well, we decided to go to Alaska. Once again, homeless, loaded everything into a trailer. I didn't even wait for the school to send me an acceptance letter. I sent them my application and we hit the road. I don't know that that was stepping out in faith as much as it was being naive and maybe a little arrogant. But we got our acceptance letter to the school in our mailbox at the school after they sent it to Iowa, and it got forwarded back up there. So while I was there, we had various trials, things that you have to deal with. I got really sick my first year. During the course of those 4 years, I worked at least 40 hours a week. I took 18 credit hours. every semester, and I was driven. I wanted to prepare, and it was a grand time, but it was difficult on all of us because it took everything I had. I became intrigued by village missions because I don't know if you guys ever met Vern. He was the district rep here. He came through Alaska looking for people, and backtracking just a little bit, a couple of weeks before Rebecca came and said, I know we're looking at doing full-time ministry somewhere. I saw this poster up, and it's something about pastors and missions. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Did you save it? No. We'll have to look at it sometime. And then Vern came through, and whenever I was talking with Vern, it was the same organization. And we went through the process, through the candidate school. That's always exciting. And I finished school, applied with Village Missions, and we got our support right away. And God brought us to a little town called Nenana. If you're familiar with Alaska, Nenana is where they bet on when the ice goes out. It may not sound exciting, but we actually found it to be quite exciting. If you watch Life Below Zero, Jesse Holmes is the dog musher on that show, and you can walk out my front door, turn to the left, walk 10 minutes, and you were at his house. We spent 13 years there. Great years, wonderful years. It was like being a foreign missionary. It's not America, even though it is. It was a traditional Athabascan village of about 300 people, and the culture was not what I had grown up with. We had to be students of the culture, same way that we'll want to be students of the culture here. While we were there, we had put having more kids on hold because we barely saw each other while I went through school. And then we got things started in Nenana, and then Emily, that's the little blonde hair, curly, larger than life, and she will not treat you like a stranger because there are no strangers. She's always 100% Emily all the time, and very vivacious. She is a light and a joy. And then Will came along, and Will will show you his stuffed shark, and right now he's talking a lot about the pyramids, so buckle in. Ministry in a cross-cultural situation like Nenana was extreme. A lot of people think drugs and abuse are big city things, but you all come from a small town, you know that that's not just big city stuff. It's everywhere. It was there. I think it's harder on all of us that are used to small towns because when somebody goes through a trial like that, it's not a stranger, it's not some unnamed person on a street corner. These are people we know. We've grown up with them, we've eaten with them, and driving down Main Street and seeing somebody stumble toward the bar on the ice, falling and hurting themselves. I know they play town drunks for jokes in Andy Griffith, but it's just not funny. That's hard. There was a lot of darkness, a lot of physical darkness, a lot of spiritual darkness. Alaska Natives commit suicide at 4 times the rate of any other people group in the U.S. It was extreme. The weather was extreme. The coldest it's been on a Sunday whenever I've preached is -70. That was chilly. I did not have a cold weather cancellation policy for church because the school didn't have one. School never canceled, although it became optional at -50 because school buses won't start. Everything about it was a little bit extreme. Ministry often looked different than the textbooks. Ministry always looks different than the textbooks. I was talking with Jeff earlier. The rule book is a starting point. The only thing that is unchangeable is the word. Our patterns of ministry have to change for the place where we live. And again, that's why I'll be relying on all y'all. Are you guys familiar with that phrase, all y'all? Okay, all right. One of my elders before was from Georgia, so I also speak a couple of different versions of English. There was extreme abuse and neglect. The abuse rate among Native kids is 100% in some villages, and I'm talking about the worst kinds of abuse. I just don't want to speak about them here. And neglect, neglect was actually, for some of these kids, the best they could hope for. It was hard. Again, the darkness had its moments. While I was there, because of those needs, I got involved in the fire service, and I was a medic for quite a while. There was a need there, and I've already chatted with some of you that have the same experience. It was good to be able to be that kind of a light and pray with people and reach out to them, but it was hard. Ministry came to a close in Nenana. We were up there for 13 years, and in Nenana, that town of 350 people, there were 8 missionary families. I think at least 8. And they were well trained, well prepared. Several were able to teach, were involved in the church and involved in other ministries. And we had spent a lot of time there. Our kids were growing older, and after a lot of prayer with our supporters and with village missions and talking it over with the elders of the church, we came to the conclusion that, this is the time, and it's a good time, and the people aren't going to suffer because it's time to move on. I just got a call from the man that is preaching at the church there last night to let me know that he was praying for me for today and praying for all y'all, because he knew that this is the beginning, and beginnings are a fun time. It was 9 months of planning and input from all of those folks, and then it was the process of getting with village missions and figuring out what was next, and they got with your elders here, Mark and Fred and Mike and Jim, to figure out the next step. And so you got lots of people to blame for me being here. But it was a lot of support. Then we got to arrive in Washington, and wow, I planned on like 3 days to unload the trailer, and the men here and Miss Maddie and all that, 90 minutes was just about fully unloaded. I hurt so bad the next day. We got here, we got everything unloaded, and I'd like to tell you a few things about ministry here. We are hoping that all y'all will help us learn the how. Again, this is going to be the basis, but there's so many different ways to reach out and so many different needs, and y'all know this place obviously better than we do. So we're going to be relying on a lot of help in order to do ministry well, to serve you all well, to serve the place where we live well. We want to work and live here, and we're going to be counting on you guys to help us live out the gospel in the community in which we live. I don't have all the answers. Like Rebecca said, who's sufficient to such a task? God has all the answers. And then all of us together relying on Christian brothers and sisters and the wisdom of those that have gone before us, that's how we're going to figure out the how for here. I'm looking forward to getting to know everybody. I'm going to mess up some names, and I'm sorry. If you'll forgive me, hopefully it'll be a two-way street, because I'm expecting you not to remember the names of my kids all the time, because keeping track of them. I actually called my son by the wrong name this morning, so if I can't keep him straight. I look forward to getting to visit you where you live and where you work, and having you come into our home. We're hoping that we can work that out. And I know there's some challenges right now with the things that are going on in our world, but we've got some options, and we want to make that happen. So I'll be contacting folks by phone and email over the next couple of weeks to figure out what works best for you and your health concerns and the things that are going on. That way we can find some ways to connect. This is the Cliff Notes version, and wow, there's a lot in between, and there's a lot for you, and we want to get to know you. I'm going to be having office hours here, and right now, anytime that I'm available, that I'm at the office, I'm going to prop the front door open if the weather at all permits it. That front door is open, and you swing by, just walk right on in. And we can have us a good chat, and maybe walk across the way and make a cup of coffee and sit at the table with Miss Rebecca, and getting to spend some time. Another thing that I've done, I've got some resources and books from moving. They're by the bulletins on the shelf back there. If I ever put any books out there, those are just for you to take. There's books, I think there's an audio back there. And whenever I find resources like that, if I have hard copies, I'll put them there. or on the church web Facebook page. I posted a link for Steve Lawson's The Attributes of God. That is an excellent course, and I'll be posting things like that so we can all learn together and do all that. And now I'm going to do something very dangerous. They told me I had, 90 minutes? It's 11:20 or so. You guys have any questions for us?
How many kids do we have?
Here or total? we got 4. We got them in 2 sets. Girl boy, because they're more collectible in sets and they have a higher resale value. Our daughter Erin is 21 and she's wrapping up a degree at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. She intends to get married to a really nice young man named Roscoe. Again, TV reference. I've gotten a lot of distance out of Roscoe people. He's been gracious and not overreacted to it. She intends to move down here with Roscoe after they get married and travel the lower 48 a little bit, so hopefully she'll be dropping by. She may even be here for Christmas this year. And my son is 19, and he is a 12 November MOS in the U.S. Army. That means vertical construction. He drives heavy equipment, graduated top of his class, and he has been given his orders to go to South Korea, Camp Humphreys. The DoD is launching a new construction effort there, and so as a brand new construction worker, he got sent to an awesome place, a dangerous place for different reasons. He may have a couple of hours in Seattle next week, and if he does, we're going to pull up and head there and try to see him. Rebecca hasn't seen him since December 29th. I got to see him graduate basic. So one way or the other, we got to try to get Mama to see her boy, and the boy to see his mama. And then Emily and Will, they're the second round, 9 and 7. Yes, sir.
How many years did you spend as a medic? What drove you into that, making that decision to do that? And were you a career or volunteer?
I did it for 8 years, I think, the last 8 years I was there. What drove me to it was, one, the need. I knew a lot of the people involved, and the other was, when Rebecca was pregnant with Emily, she, can I tell the story?
You can.
All right. She nicked herself, saw the blood, fainted, and creased her head on a door frame hard. I called the service and they showed up, and I've always been of the opinion if you benefit from something, you need to find a way to contribute to it. And they took care of us, and so let's